Welcome back to Betting the Limit. I'm your host, Drew Shore. Today we're going to be joined by a former teammate of mine who played 643 games in the NHL, won 2 Stanley Cups. He retired in 2020 and is now the founder and CEO of Clever, an athletic platform that provides an easy way for coaches, players, and parents to share video and feedback. Welcome to the podcast, Kris Versteeg.
Shorzy, how are you?
Good. How are you? Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm good. Busy with kids. Busy.
Yeah, we were just talking about it. You had a pretty busy weekend this weekend.
Yeah. I had my one boy play in a hockey tournament that out here in out here in Toronto. He got to play against teams from all over the U.S., Canada, Quebec, and area, and then I had my other son playing. So all I do is I'm a professional limo driver now.
How do we do at the tournament?
I was just telling you about this. My son lost to Nathan Gerby, the legend Nathan Gerby, the Detroit team in the semifinals. They are, if you want to see legitimate U9 there, American 8U hockey, you could watch that. But their team is something special, and Nathan ended up winning. I'm sure he still made them hit the cold tubs right after they won. But yeah, it was fun. We got to see a ton of actually old NHL guys. Mike Komisarek was there with his son, Petrie's son, Tarasenko. There's a lot of kids that were actually at that event, and Gerby was there coaching. So it's pretty cool to see some old faces either that you played with or played against at the event.
We were talking about doing some of the TV stuff you're doing. Did you get any time to watch any of the World Juniors this year?
So I got to watch, I would say 80% of Team Canada. Got to watch the US probably again about 50-60%. I got to watch the gold medal game. Just an incredible group of kids that the Americans brought. Canadians too. Obviously, they didn't pick the right kids, and the coaching was very poor. But yeah, that American squad is something else.
I was on a rant the other day. I got a couple text messages. Did you see that thing that Team Canada didn't practice one time the whole tournament?
No.
Because they thought the kids were tired.
They practiced one time. I heard they didn't even practice between, was it the 27th to the 2nd or something like that?
They didn't practice once. So like one of the Canadian kids was coming out. They were asking him about like their power play and basically indirectly said like we had no time to work on it. We didn't skate. Like I think the U.S. team practiced a bunch, like every other day, like for 20 or 30 minutes, and Team Canada decided not to practice one time.
Yeah, they said they were too tired. The young 19, 20, or 18-year-olds are too tired to go on for 30 minutes and tick it around on the PP and maybe get a little bit of chemistry and feeling good. Yeah, that's smart Canadian decisions. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a bold move. I didn't think I thought we'd seen them all before, but that was definitely a new one for me.
Well, think about when you played. Like, I know morning skates have kind of come out of the game. I know when I played with the Hawks, Q was big about giving us a day off, but you would have to morning skate the next day if you took the day off before. So if you're a young kid and you take a day off and then you don't morning skate, to get the oil back on the pan essentially and get it warmed up, right? And then you're not working on certain structural things that you need to do in order to execute in a short time tournament. You're not really setting yourselves up for success. I just remember sometimes when you wouldn't play, no morning skate and play, you feel like crap the first period, right? Sometimes you don't even feel good all game.
Yeah, and that's during an 82 game season. This is brand new kids with new line mates, new power play units, and everything.
Yeah, no, it's there's a lot of weird things, line combinations with Team Canada, who they selected, who they were deploying at certain times. It's like Carson Rakoff had a point a game in the World Juniors last year. He makes it again as a 19-year-old, and he's healthy scratched 4 of the 5 games. And the one game he plays 4 shifts. He's on for 1 power play, and the team scores. Then he gets healthy scratched. He's a point per game as an 18-year-old, but he can't play as a 19-year-old. All of a sudden, they're smarter. He's a big 6'5" left winger who can score. So, player personnel, and then certain players, like you hear Dave Cameron, and I love Dave. He was a coach of mine in Calgary, but you hear him talking about, I can't sit guys. It's a short tournament. I'm like, why can't you sit guys? If Easton Cowan takes a bad penalty or this kid takes a bad penalty, they're just allowed to go on the ice the next shift. So it was interesting strategy and coaching and deployment of players. And like you said, no practice. I don't I don't see how they were set up for success in that type of I guess ecosystem of crap that they did.
It was amazing to watch as a fan last night, but what'd you think of the 3-on-3 overtime?
Can I swear on this podcast?
Yeah, let it rip.
Oh, it was fucking boring. It was horrible. I think US is the better of the two teams by a mile. They had puck 90%, but everyone keeps ragging the puck back because they don't want to make a mistake. And I would have done the same thing. Totally would have done the same thing. But why can't they play 5-on-5 in an overtime if it's a 20-minute period? I understand TV rights and all this stuff. They want to shorten the game and stuff. Put a 10-minute 5-on-5 and let them go at it for 10 minutes and do a shootout rather than, I just think 3-on-3 to settle a World Juniors. I know people are against shootout. I'd be actually more for a shootout than a 20-minute 3-on-3 for World Juniors. Like at my tournament this weekend, we had U7s play 3-on-3, 2-on-2, 1-on-1 because you only have a certain amount of time for ice slot and it has to end so the next game can start. This is the World Juniors. You got 20,000 people in a rink and you got to play 3-on-3 for 20 minutes and it's boring, right? I wish there was a rule where there was an over and back rule or something in 3-on-3 that would force play to stay in the O zone or force them to get more creative to attack, which would create more turnovers. But I watch NHL 3-on-3 now and I just think it's boring as well. It's just ragging, go now, rag. So, I mean, you even could hear the fans kind of getting restless at that time too.
Yeah, and I mean, the Finland goalie made a ton of huge saves, but I think it should have just been 5-on-5, even if they went to 3 or 4 overtimes. I think, just like a Stanley Cup playoff game.
Just let it go, yeah. And you're right. Like the U.S. had probably 5 or 6 chances they should have ended before that. I mean, Finland had that one chance where the kid went through his legs and kind of threw the backhand hoper, but you could just see the quality of the U.S. players was far superior, and that's why they dominated the 3-on-3. If you're going to put 8 studs out every other shift on 3-on-3 and Finland might have 1 or 2, they're really up against it in a puck possession game, especially 3-on-3 against those type of quality of players.
It's been all over the media, but it's pretty crazy the last 24 months my boy Dave Carl's had between winning the World Juniors, then winning the national championship, then winning the World Juniors again. You're a guy who follows the NHL very closely. If you were him and you could pick a young roster to step into and coach over the next couple of years, which organization would you be looking at?
Oh, that's a good question. He's a hell of a coach, eh? Like watching, obviously what he's done with Denver, continues to do with the World Juniors. Even that decision to put that number 2 on the ice. What was his name? I can't remember. Who scored the goal? Stigl or something like that?
Yeah, he hadn't scored all tournament. I remember he hadn't scored all tournament. Yeah.
So the kid hasn't scored all tournament. He plays 11 minutes and then he throws him on the ice. Like he must have had a feeling like this kid could fly. We have a set play that maybe that was some sort of a set play for a 3-on-3. Like just lofted into this kid who can cook up the ice, get him on, get him a shot and get him off. But that's a coaching decision that he made to put that kid in that situation at that time. If I'm looking at a team, yeah, I would be looking at somewhere probably San Jose over Chicago. Would be a young team, probably on the rise. They have some other good prospects coming in. I really like Celebrini. Really love how he plays a game. He's a young kid, but he just totally gets it from day one. It's pretty actually impressive to watch. That could be an interesting young roster. Another one that could be of interest, they are a bit younger, they're coming up, would maybe be the Philadelphia Flyers. A team that's got some young prospects that now have come in. I know Torts he's kind of got them going in a good direction, but maybe at some point that voice might have to change. And that could be a team right at the right time to win, to get a young coach in. That could be another interesting team thinking about it on the Eastern Seaboard.
You spent time in both Philadelphia and you had a ton of success in Chicago. I didn't realize you were drafted by Boston. How did you end up playing your first NHL game? Were you traded from Boston to Chicago, or how did you end up playing your first NHL game for Chicago?
Yeah, so I was with Boston when I was 19 at the end of my junior year, went and played in the minors. I was drafted there at 20. I ended up, instead of going back to junior, played for the Providence Bruins. Was having actually a really good year as a 20-year-old. Believe I was top 10 in scoring in the AHL as a 20-year-old. And I was actually on my way to Manchester from Providence on the bus, and Sean Donovan and Glenn Murray both got hurt. And I was getting told by my coach a little bit before that, hey, you might be getting called up to the NHL. And literally a year before, I was working in Sport Check. Like, I didn't even think I was ever going to play in the NHL. So, like, now I'm on the bus, like, oh, I might go to the NHL. This is pretty crazy, So I just remember he's like, hey, Kris, come up to the front. We're about 30 minutes into the bus ride. And he's like, hey, you just got traded. And I'm like, traded? What are you talking about? I'm 20 years old. I got 50 points in 40 games. What's going on here? Like, and he goes, no, they wanted to bring in a veteran winger. So they traded me for the guy who was leading the AHL in scoring, Brandon Bochenski. He was 25 years old. I think he had like 34 goals in 35 games. Guy was lighting it up. So I ended up getting traded to Chicago. I ended up going to Norfolk the rest of the year, never got called up to Chicago. And then the following year is where I was playing in Rockford in the minors. And then about 20 games in, I got the call that I was getting called up, and I got to actually go play my first ever NHL game in Calgary, so my hometown.
I didn't realize one of the things I was thinking about is that had to have been pretty hard you think you're going to the NHL, then you find out as a young kid you're getting traded and then spend the whole rest of the year in the minors.
It was a wild ride, because if you actually rewind about a year before that, I was playing defense in junior as a 19-year-old, like not even thinking the NHL was anything anymore, because Boston at that point said they weren't going to sign me. Never even thought the NHL was, anything. I just figured, maybe I'll pack my stuff and go to Europe and do that, right? But at the end of the 19-year-old year, I had such a good camp in Boston, I guess, when I was 19. The AHL coach wanted to bring me up to try me back on forward at the end of that year. So that's when I got put on forward again. And then Boston signed me for the league minimum rookie bonus, right? So I got signed by Boston. And so like it was a really roller coaster ride to get there. And then like you said, I end up starting my 20-year-old year as a forward again and lighting it up in the AHL. And I'm like, man, I'm going to the show here. And then like you said, you get a called up to the front of the bus and you're traded just like that to Chicago. And then you go spend your rest of your time in the minors. The thing that pissed me off the most though was in Boston, I was playing, or in Providence, I was playing on the first line with David Krejci. So obviously I get a lot of free points by just giving him the puck. He was still one of the best players I've ever played with. But then when I got to Norfolk, they put me on the fourth line the entire time. And I still had a point a game in Norfolk on the fourth line. They would not give me power play. So that was starting to eat at me a little bit as a player. Like, I'm playing on this team, but then I come here, but there's always stuff going on. So I remember at the start of the next season again, they started me on the fourth line and I walked into Mike Haviland. Mike Haviland's a great friend of mine, by the way. He was with Colorado College and all that. I remember walking into Javi's office. I'm like, dude, I gotta play higher than the fourth line. I came here last year. And then after that, in the next 7 games, I had a good stint over 7 games and got my first NHL game. So if you actually look over that about year and a half trend, it was from playing defense in junior to not knowing if you're going to play to getting traded or thinking you're going to play to getting traded to going fourth line to starting fourth line the next year to then going up. It was a wild year and a half.
When you got to Chicago, that was still when they were getting like the first and second overall pick and they were getting like 8,000 fans at a game. How cool was it to be there kind of at that start and then obviously have it turn into what it did?
Yeah, it was unbelievable. So like I remember 2007-8 when I was with the Rockford Ice Hogs at the start of the year when we got sent down, I went to one of the first games of the year. It's when Taze actually scored his first goal against the Avalanche. And I remember sitting there and I'm like, hey, where do I sit? I asked the person who's sitting us in seats. They're like, I'll just sit wherever you want, right? And I'm playing in the AHL, coming to an NHL game. So I'm just sitting in regular seats, me, David Boland. All of a sudden we start in kind of like the top area. We're moving down to the middle. And by the end, we're in the low bowl. You know what I mean? So you kind of see the start of that. Then you get called up. You play a couple games in Chicago. As that season started to progress, Kane and Taze really started to bring energy back to the team, I would say. And people started to get behind that. And I remember when Rocky's father passed away, William, Rocky took over the team and he kind of opened up the book. He also got hockey back on TV in Chicago. So that 07-08 year of the team starting to trend in the right way, you could see the building starting to fill over the year. And that's when I started to get called up and play games, and you could see that. And then heading into that 09-10 year, that's really where I mean, or no, the 08, 09 year, that's where the team just took off. I remember from day one, it was sold out. The national anthems were crazy. I remember people hanging bed sheets from the third row if they didn't like a goalie or a player. It was complete madness in there, and all around the city, they started to follow the Hawks again. But just seeing, like, I even remember going to a bar in Chicago in 2007, 2006, 7, right when I got traded there at the end of the year. When I was driving through town, I pull out my NHL card and the guy goes, "Get in the back of the line." You know what I mean? Trying to get past the line to go in. So to see where we came from and to where it's went is pretty amazing. And, you think back, Duncan Keith tells stories of where he used to stand on the corner trying to hand out Hawks tickets to fans. Like they would give him stacks of tickets to try to get fans to come to games, and he'd be out there handing out tickets to becoming one of the most idolized hockey players in Chicago history. It's pretty amazing.
All these teams who stink and are rebuilding are always like, oh, we're drafting good players, we're putting pieces in place, like we're going to be really good for, you know what I mean, in 5 years. Did you actually believe from an on-ice standpoint, like when you were playing there that first year, were you like, okay, something special is brewing, or you just had no idea, you were happy to be the NHL and you were playing?
Yeah, it was a little bit of both. I think during my first year, like up and down year, I was up for about 25, 30 games. I was hurt, but I played, I think, about 13. I remember during that year, I'd be watching these like young guys like Kane and Tays and just how dominant they were. And I'd be like, yeah, this is like these players are pretty special. But also, as you know, when you're in it, you don't always know. But really, when that 08, 09 year happened, and we ended up firing actually Savvy, who's a great guy, but we brought in Joel Quenneville, the team just started to like go to the next level. We'd be playing it against top teams in the NHL, whether it was Detroit and we're able to hang with them, where the year before they'd crush us. You're able to go on long winning streaks. I think we had a 9-game winning streak. So as that year started to build, the 08, 09 year, and got into the playoffs, we were supposed to lose to Calgary in the first round. We beat Calgary. We're supposed to lose to Vancouver, who loaded up. They brought in Matt Sundin and all these guys in the second round. We end up beating them. And then we lose to Detroit in the Western Conference Finals. I think as that year built, you could start to feel like, holy, we have something special here, and we lost here. What can we do next year if we actually put it all together and maybe pick up another piece or two?
Every single player who's interviewed or on a podcast or even asked about Joel Quenneville raves about him, says best coach they've ever had, phenomenal players coach. What made him so special behind the bench?
I've always said Joel is the best gambler I've ever seen on a bench in my life. Like he reads who's going, who's not going, and he knows it from the puck drop. It's wild. I always tell stories about, I could be on a 5, 6, 7 game point streak, right? And I'd be playing first, second line with Kane and Tays, or playing with like, at that time, Marty Havlat or certain other guys. And then all of a sudden, one bad shift, I'd be off the line. Next guy, that guy would score the next shift. And as a player, when you get replaced and that guy who gets in your position scores that next shift, you're just like, oh my gosh, right? So I've always said, if you're a hockey player and you play for Joel Quenneville, you gotta have some sort of mental capability to put that past, because he won't change two guys so much, but he'll interchange guys as games go on. If a guy who usually plays 8, 9 minutes is playing hot, he might get 15 minutes because he's earned it, right? And that might lead to a win. He's a guy that can just gamble on certain players at certain moments and certain times. He knows when guys are going and when to give them more and when to give them less. He just had an insane feel for the game that I've never seen any other coach have. I remember, playing in Calgary, and you have the same lines for 63 games in a row, right? So there's always a bit of staleness that can come with that at times. Sometimes lines are clicking and you got to keep them together. But with Joel, it was always like, you got to stay ready, because if you're not going, you're losing your spot. And we also had the team where guys could interchange with you at any time. I mean, he'd have Bufflin on the fourth line and Brower in the healthy scratch and Ladd on the third line. And, these are all guys that could go up and down a lineup and play at any position at any time. But he always knew who was going. It was nuts.
You probably handled that really good when you were on a 7-game point streak playing on the first line, and then he dropped you down to the fourth line.
Lose it. Yeah, you'd be sitting on the bench like, oh my gosh. Yeah, good thing. Yeah, I was 22 or 22, 23 in those days, but yeah, you ate a lot of crow and you'd have to suck it up.
I was actually
Uh,
laughing about this. I don't know if I've ever told this story, but my first year pro, we were in Buffalo and I didn't know you very well. But I think you were the first coach. Like I'm used to college where a coach says to jump, you say how high. And I vividly remember we were losing or something between periods and like the coaches asked you to come in the room and you basically told them like no, you were busy and you just like kept taping kept taping your stick. But I was like, what the fuck is going on? It was like the first time I had ever seen like a player basically just like indirectly yell back at the coach and like they wanted to talk to you and you're just like, no, I'm good, thanks. And just kept taping your stick and then out we went.
yeah, that's how it was. I mean, when you think about back in the day, how much we were challenged at every single time, right? Like walk here, jump here, this high, where, hit, always. And I remember at times you could only take so much. So sometimes you'd be like, no, you know,
How cool was the first cup run you went on in Chicago?
that cup run was absolute magical. And it kind of came off, like I said, that 08, 09 year of when we had, pretty much 95% of the same guys, and you could see the city rallying around the team. But when we beat Nashville in game 5, I believe it was game 5, when Hossa took the 5-minute penalty, we're shorthanded for the last 3 minutes. Kane scores shorthanded with like a minute left. Hossa comes out of the box 2 minutes into overtime and scores the goal. I remember like kind of at that moment, like we should be destined to win this thing. Like that just doesn't happen to win game 5 when the series is tied 2-2 in that type of fashion. But as it went on, like I said, when you have celebrities coming to every game, Vince Vaughn's at every game, Jordan's coming to games, you have, fans, like I'm talking thousands of fans standing outside waiting for you to come out of the rink at practice or the day. It was just something that you couldn't even comprehend. Like I tell everyone, like we used to have this convention in Chicago and we'd stay in this hotel and there'd be 2, 3,000 people on the street, right? Like you couldn't even comprehend how much the people of Chicago loved the Hawks in those days. And then from when we won it, I remember after winning it and we brought it down to the tavern. It was like this bar area, tons of bars. We brought the cup down there right after we won it and we brought it into this one bar and we came out and there's 10,000 people on the street. They had to bring out the horses, literally police horses to like corral. And then all of a sudden I remember looking out this bar and there's streets going each way and all you could see is people. This is like 10 o'clock at night and all you could see is the cup surfing across like 10,000 people in the middle of these streets. But um, thinking back on it, you're almost like, I don't even, you can't even believe it was real just because of how much that city embraced the team and how much they loved the Chicago Blackhawks. It was nuts. Like I'm telling you, conventions, autograph signings, whatever you were a part of, hundreds and thousands of people showed up and they supported that team. And it's, you think back, you're just so grateful for like to be a part of something like that.
It's crazy how quickly they were able to turn it around. I mean, from having that first overall pick, I think they took Kane in 2007 to then winning in 2010. I think a lot of people don't realize like how young Kane and Tays were during that cup run. How cool was it like what they were able to do on the ice at such a young age?
It was nuts. Like you think about that whole team during that cup run, that first one, like Kane just turned 21, Tays just turned 21. Me and Ladd were 23 and 24, and Brower was 24, Bufflin's 24, Seabrook's 24. Like all these guys, Keith was 26. Like you had all these guys that were so young at that time. And like you said, you see all these teams that are like, oh, we're going to turn it around so fast. But it was like it was almost the perfect concoction of characters that came together that all hated to lose. And I think that you think back on that team and that time in that city and how when Will, like I said, I remember being at William Wirtz's funeral in 2007 when he died and Rocky took over his son. And when he just said, he opened up the book, he's like, all of a sudden we'd only get one stick in the minors. All of a sudden we could get 3 sticks in the minors. We didn't have a washing machine in the minors. All of a sudden a washing machine comes in. In the NHL, they could start to use other equipment or skates. And now all of a sudden the TV's on and now players are being treated like true NHLers. But I don't think people have really given Rocky Wirtz enough credit for what he did in 2007 of how he basically, like I said, opened the book. He was so accessible. and he wanted that team to do better than anything right after his father had passed away, almost doing it opposite of what his father had done, right? But probably learning from that to say, hey, how do we get the Hawks back on TV? How do we get them big again? And then, like you said, they get all these draft picks, and at a young age, they're winning Stanley Cups. It's like it all came together so fast and made for a magical run. But it was all because of Rocky Wirtz.
When you won there, did you think you'd be like a lifelong Blackhawk guy, how some of those guys were, Keith and Tays and Seabrook and those guys? Or did you kind of know that your time was coming to an end and you're going to be bouncing around for the next couple of years?
Yeah, I knew. I mean, I remember. So after we won in 2010, Stan Bowman and Vince Vaughn, we were at a bar. Everyone was just at a bar standing there. Vince, I knew Vince pretty well. And it was us three standing there. And we're just bullshitting, talking. And then Stan goes, hey, Steger, I'm going to have to let you know that we're probably going to trade you. We can't retain your salary. Right. So at that year before, I just signed a bigger salary. And it was literally us three standing there. And then imagine this scene, Vince Vaughn, how he talks. He's like, you can't trade this guy. What are you talking about? You can't trade this guy. Look what he did. Look what he did on this cup run. So then you have Vince Vaughn vouching for you against Stan Bowman to keep you in Chicago. But then Stan's like, we just can't keep him because of the money and all this. So I still remember the moment when I found out I was going to be traded. And then, like you said, you go to Toronto and Philly and Florida and back to Chicago. You make your way back for another couple of years. But I still remember when, I had Vince Vaughn vouching for me to stay in Chicago, but obviously not enough because I ended up moving on to Toronto pretty much about a week and a half later after that conversation.
Did you enjoy playing in Toronto?
I like Toronto. I thought, I liked playing in big markets at times where there was pressure and you had to perform. That's something I felt, especially in the second year in Florida at times when the team's not doing well. And I was injured as well, where it's that market pressure for some guys. Maybe they don't like it. For me, I always liked being in a market where there was market pressure, where you had to get up for that game or you were going to hear about it. I love just, wearing the maple leaf. It was something that you grow up and you get to see these original six teams, and you're from Canada. And not that I love the Maple Leafs, I was an Oilers fan growing up, but you got to play for a Canadian team in the biggest market of hockey. So I liked it. Our team wasn't great. We weren't a great team. We're around a 9-10 place team in our division, in the Eastern Division. And then soon after, I remember same thing. Berkey came up to me. We had a team dinner and he goes, hey man, like we've traded away so many draft picks. We're going to have to trade you. And that's when me, Caberlet, I think they moved out Boscheman and all of us at that time. So figures like I got traded in a bar a lot. But
when we were together in Florida, that was kind of in the middle of your career. You had 2 or 3 years where I can't remember what you were going through, but you had some crazy injuries, like where it was almost back to back to back. What happened during those years?
Those are dark times. Dark times, as you know, as an athlete. Like when I was, at 20, I kind of caught fire in the minors, and then I rolled it into the NHL. And even my first year in Florida, I had 420 plus goal seasons in the NHL. I'm feeling good about myself. And then at the end of that Florida year, I remember telling them something's wrong with my hip, right? And I ended up actually, right prior to that, I ended up getting bilateral hernia surgery because it was wrong. But I said something's also wrong with my hip. And then I had the tear in my hip, so I had to get my hip redone. And then I came back from my hip surgery right during the lockout. And I think it was like the 6th or 7th game in, Radko Gudas kneed me. I blew my ACL out. So then I had ACL in Florida. I was out they ended up having me come back and play at 5 months, which I told them I can't play right now. But I played after 5 months after ACL tear and like the reconstruction and a tibial fracture and all that, right? So you come back, you try to play the next year, you're a shell of yourself. You go to Chicago, and then I ended up actually re-tearing the hip and then had hand surgery, and ended up having to get hip surgery again about 2 years later, because I know when you're in the NHL, you're just trying to fight through things. So within, 6 years, I had 2 hip surgeries, bilateral hernia, hand surgery, and ACL. And that was pretty much from 25 to 30. That's those surgeries over there.
I remember too. Like I couldn't recall exactly, but it was back to back to back. What would your advice be for a player who's going through, I mean, I hope no one has to go through an injury stretch like you did, but a younger player in the league now who is going through a ton of adversity, what would your advice looking back on how to handle that be?
Yeah, like I said, it was dark, man. Like I don't think like you come to the rink and you're a shell of yourself. You know you can't perform on the ice, so you become angry almost, right? And then if the team's mad at you and this is mad and you're not performing, it's a hard position to be in. The biggest advice I've always given to guys that I've known have torn ACLs or have gone through injuries is take your time and don't let them push you back too fast, just like what happened in Florida or other areas. Not always for me. I wasn't rushed back all the time, but in that specific situation, take your time to especially get your power phase back in. To if you think about an ACL, they try to rush you at 5 months. Basically, at 5 months, you're just healed, right? You still got to go through all your building phase of prepper, like your power phase. You haven't even done power phase probably for training yet. So make sure you take the ample amount of time right in order to get back, because if you come back too early, first off, mentally you're going to be a disaster. You're not going to trust yourself. Two, the team's going to be pissed off at you because you're not going to be able to perform. And then three, you're just not going to be able to do what you need to do in order to help the team win. And it's just a bad concoction in order to see success for you or the team. And I know sometimes you get forced back into that. Maybe it's a little bit different now. I haven't been in an NHL locker room since 2018, but definitely take your time and mentally figure it out. Because if you go through 6 months of just healing, all these guys are either training and getting better. You're just trying to get back to square one while everyone else is getting better. So it's a lot of mental gymnastics. Maybe even get a psych coach. I don't know. Talk to someone, right? Talk to a therapist. Probably would help, sports therapist. But I would say always take your time.
It's hard to explain that dynamic to someone who's a non-athlete, but when you're hurt, you kind of almost have this guilt and you almost feel like the team is angry at you. So they do rush you back. And I do feel like depending on where you are in your career, that is such good advice to tell players to be like, hey, I need more time. But it's such a complicated situation because you've been out for so long. You want to be back there battling with your team. You're getting paid well. But I do think that more guys need to go in there and almost stand up for themselves and be like, hey, I need another month, 2 months, whatever it is, because that's going to make the next 2 or 3 years better.
Yeah, like you said, it's the internal guilt if you don't feel a part of that team anymore when you're not in the lineup. Even as a healthy scratch, you feel that, right? When you're healthy scratch, like these fucking guys don't need me. Or if you're a hurt player, you start to feel it's like, man, I want to be back in, but you come to the rink and you're not really with the guys. So it's that guilt of a player, like I need to get back in, which is why athletes are so great and why they are at that level, is because they feel that way. I would assume most do. Um, but yeah, sometimes just taking a step back and actually realizing what the best case scenario is to slow down and make sure it's done right before you come back, which I never did, but I wish I did.
Do you ever remember that? Do you remember that time in Florida when it was like a 4 or 5 person healthy scratch skate and you went on the ice early and flipped all the pucks into the stand? So the actual practice was supposed, I think it was in like, were we in like Washington or I can't remember where it was.
Yeah, we were in Washington. Yeah. It was yeah, we flew in that night and he's like, healthy scratches are coming to skate in the morning. And that's again, I was playing it 5 months after ACL and I just, you know what I mean? I'm like, I'm already
Yeah.
pissed off. Haven't been playing well. And to their credit, I'm playing like shit, so you might as well healthy scratch me. But I'm like, if you're gonna force me back in the lineup and then not play me on power play or certain things, and then you're gonna healthy scratch me, well, then I got on the ice. I'm like, I'm just gonna fucking fire all the pucks in the stands. So I remember halfway through, Gord Murphy's like, "Where's all the pucks?" I'm like, "I think they're gone." And he goes, "All right, let's go."
He called practice. Yeah, it was good.
He called practice.
Uh,
Yeah.
you were able to overcome those times, get back to Chicago. When you got back to Chicago, was it like you never left?
Yes and no. Like I said, when I got back to Chicago, uh, when I left, I was wearing number 32. I was healthy, young, and playing well. When I came back, I was a shell of myself, right? Wearing a different number. So, and being questioned again of why I wasn't the player that I was when I left. So there was this sense of comfortability coming back to a team and a bunch of guys that you cared about, and literally still all my best, like close buddies today, right? So that part was good, but as on the ice, I wasn't comfortable just because I knew I couldn't do what I needed to do. I didn't really feel comfortable till the following year where I could actually take time to rest throughout the summer and do all my training to get ready for the 14-15 season. But as for coming back to the city, and then that welcome back they gave me and all that. I mean, we played the Sharks at home that one night. We played Nashville my first game, but we came back and played the Sharks on a back to back. And I remember when they kind of gave the ovation coming back, I was like, oh yeah, this is what it's all about, being back home in Chicago with all these fans that care. So, but I did feel bad because I definitely was a shell of myself that first year.
Was that the playoff run though? Because wasn't one of the times you won, you like weren't playing at the start, but then ended up playing like first line in a bunch of the big games. Like you had a crazy playoff run during one of those. I remember watching.
That was the 2014-15 playoff run. So actually, like I said, that year I didn't play very well in the playoffs either. That 2000, like I played fourth line, didn't really play much. Maybe the odd third line in the 13 playoff run, but the 13-14, but the 14-15 playoff run at Winter Classic. I think I had 27 points in 32 games, was playing great. And then Eric Fair took a shot and broke my hand, and I had to go get hand reconstruction. They basically had to pin my hand back together. So I took 2 months off, came back, and then I had osteus pubis. So kind of during that start of that playoff run, I played a bit against Nashville, went and got injections to try to help with that. And then got healthy scratched a couple more games because Bickle was playing good. And then my son was being born. So we ended up playing Anaheim. I think I played one game in that series, and my son was being born. We just done, and we're playing now Tampa Bay in Tampa Bay. So I'm actually going to Toronto to watch my son be born June 2nd. And I get a call from Quenneville. He's like, hey, Bixie's not doing well right now. And at that time, they thought it was vertigo, but I'm assuming it must have been what he's dealing with now with MS, right? They're like, Bixie's not doing too well. You got to come play. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, I haven't played in like 2 weeks. Haven't done, I'm in Toronto. So my son gets born at like, I think 1 a.m. The next flight out's at 7, fly to Tampa Bay and playing against Tampa Bay that night. So that was a wild, like I said, played pretty much. I didn't play game 3, but we won game 1, lost game 2, didn't play game 3, we lost game 3, and then we won game 4, 5, and 6. And I was able to play like a pretty good role leading it out. Played pretty well. Yeah, that was again, like, it was just a wild ride of injuries and getting through shit. And then all of a sudden you're at the hospital with your kid being born, and you're on a flight back to Tampa Bay when you weren't supposed to be playing.
They were able to win. You were there for 2 of them. They won 3 cups in 5 years. Tampa came pretty close to doing that recently. But with the salary cap now, do you think these days of some of these teams being dynasties for 5-10 year periods is trending downward, or do you think we're going to continue to see them?
So I think we had a bit of a few tough years to where the hard cap, because of COVID, made teams have to get rid of good players. I felt the same way in 2008, 9, 10 when the salary cap was about 40 million. And then all of a sudden I'm getting paid, Bufflin's getting paid, Ladd's getting paid. And then all of a sudden you can't retain all these other top guys on good salary. I felt these last 4 or 5 years was similar to that, where like Tampa Bay has to get rid of all these guys. I think as long as the salary cap starts to trend upwards, as long as the business side is good, I think you could start to get back into some of these teams who've drafted development well, add good free agents. They can get into those 2-3 cup year, possibility runs just because of the cap going up. But I do find what Tampa did is their team was good. They were all on good salaries during the hard cap time where other teams had to offload as well, right? So while they were figuring out ways to keep 18 million on the books, which is brilliant by them, I don't fault them at all. But I think as long as this new COVID era of hard cap goes away and they can figure out ways to draft and development, well, I think you could get back into some small dynasties for sure.
You bounced around a little bit towards the end of your career. You got to play in Calgary, which was home for you. I'm sure that was awesome. Then played a little bit in Europe. Was it an easy decision to retire for you when it was that time?
Yeah. 2018, I remember being in Dallas and I made a turn and all of a sudden my hip fully went. And ended up not getting any NHL offers that summer, which was hard. So I was like, let's try Russia. So I got an offer in Russia. I ended up couldn't go because I couldn't get my wife and kids really over at the time. I actually didn't mind it. We were there. It was actually a pretty good time, good team, good guys on the team. I ended up coming home, thought I was going to retire, and then I got a call from my neighbor, Liam Reddix. He's like, my team's looking for a forward in Växjö, Sweden. So Växjö ended up buying me out from Omsk. I went to Växjö, played the end of the year, and I actually played well. Like I was like, I had a point a game leading into the end of the year. Playoffs was well. And then I'm like, let's try to play hockey again next year. And knowing that my hip was fully gone, and when you're taking 4 Advil and 4 Tylenol a game just to play a hockey game, you're probably done anyways. But yeah, I remember going back to Rockford. They asked me to come back to be the captain to help the young kids. I got injured again at the start of the year. Had to do with my hip and groin. It was brutal. And then I told Mark Bernard, who's a great guy with the Rockford Ice Hogs, he's their GM. I said, man, I can't be out there clanking around the ice, taking ice away from these prospects. So I'm probably going to go to the Spengler Cup, go play with my brother and retire. And that's pretty much what I did. Retired from Chicago, or left Chicago in November. Went and played Spengler Cup, which was, have you played Spengler?
Yeah, I played it 1 year. It was awesome.
Unreal experience. Brought my whole family. Pretty much knew that was the end of the swan song out there. Broke my foot actually in the gold medal game. Never thought I was going to play another game in my life because COVID was starting to happen. And then my brother called me to come back over. Literally didn't put my equipment on for 2 months because I had 3 fractures in my foot. Put my skates, or flew out to Nitra, which is in Slovakia. Got on a bus, went to Hungary. Put my skates on for the first time in 2 months. Played against this Hungary team with my brother. And me and him actually assisted on 2 goals together. And that was my last ever hockey game. So it was, I really wanted to play with my brother one time as well. I'm sure you just the same way, right? You're so close. We're 2 years in age gap. We never really got to play. So that was a special moment for me, something I was willing to do. And then obviously COVID happened, and I had 48 hours to get on a plane to get back to Canada before you got locked in borders.
That's awesome.
That was pretty much it. But, being on the ice with your brother is something that you can never really explain to anyone. It was a pretty special moment to have my last game with him.
I ended up playing a couple games in Carolina, but I did the exact same thing. Nick and I went over and played with Gabrick. Gabrick owns a team in Slovakia, and it was hilarious. I'm sure you can tell. So the team wasn't paying us anything. Gabby was like, oh, you guys can live with me or whatever. So we went over there for 2 weeks, but it was such a cool experience. And you'll love this one. We walk in the first day, and the lines are up on the board or whatever. And I can't remember if I was playing center or he was playing center, and whatever it was, he basically was telling me, he's like, I got way more games played, so you're playing on the wing. And I was telling him, I'm like, well, if you have way more games played, this is Slovakia, so let me play center. And then, you should be able to play anywhere in the lineup. Fast forward, the game starts. I somehow end up playing center. He sits on the wing, and every face-off I don't win. He literally stares me down for 5 seconds before making any attempt to get the puck. And then finally he's like, okay, I'm going in. And then I think he won the next 10 faceoffs clean back. So safe to say I ended up on the wing, but it was just so fun. And I knew I was going to be done playing soon. And I was so happy I did that.
Don't worry. I played on the wing with your brother too. We were arguably one of the best fourth lines in LA over 15 games.
But my wife loved that too. Mid-COVID, she was like, wait, you're going to play hockey in Slovakia for free with Nick. And I was like, yeah. This is about to be, she loved that. So that was good.
Yeah, that happened to me too. But my brother actually had a good experience. He was there for 4 years. I think you maybe played against him. But yeah, he said it's a hockey mad country though, man. I tell you, those fans.
Well, that's what was so shitty during my experience is we went during COVID. So even the town, I don't know if you remember, but we were eating outside, and little a lot of the restaurants inside were closed. So we had no fans, I think, for all the games we played. So it would have been cool to see during normal times, but happy I did it.
Yeah.
All right. You retire from hockey. You're doing some stuff on TV. It seems like your main focus now is an app you created. Tell me everything about it. I want to know how the idea came to start it, where it's at now, and excited to dive into it.
Yeah, so when I retired in 2020, it's kind of like you said, during the COVID times, I had, some ex-pros and juniors and then some young kids that were parents were trying to send me video that I could street or take a video, coach it, and send it back. And there was just no platform with your phone or a tablet that efficiently allowed me just to say, take a video of a text message video and pull it up and draw on it and voice it over and send it back. So me and Josh McNiven and my brother, we were figuring out a way how to start this company to build this technology. And that would have been in October of 2021 now. And yeah, so where we are today, it's a fully functional platform. You can go in there, you can coach video, share video, host video. It's been used for recruitment as well for teams and organizations on the video sharing side. But again, the bread and butter of the app was just to streamline video coaching and be able to do it from a phone or tablet anywhere in real time.
So is the main use, if I'm a skills coach, I'm working with a player, he wants me to look at a clip, he sends me a clip, I'm able to easily pull it up, look at it, give some feedback, and send it back?
Yep. Yes, we have skills coaches use it. Team coaches actually use it quite often. So coaches in my program and other programs, if there's a breakout, you could pull it up. You could coach it and send it to that parent to show the kid, or you could pull it up and read like right there and draw on it as well. So it doesn't just have to be a skills coach in hockey. We have actually 8 different sports on the platform. It definitely works well for isolated swing sports like baseball, even shooting and hockey and all that, golf as well. But I think what I've seen with coaches using it, it's the IQ side where it can really take off, especially in a sport like hockey, soccer, where you can kind of show kids, this is where you are on the ice, draw on it. This is where you could move. This is what your team could do on the power play, penalty kill, all that. I really see a lot of benefit for the team side as well.
I don't know a ton about this, but I've never heard of any, like, is there a ton of competition in this space? I mean, I know that at least when I'm getting videos on different hockey things, I'm still getting them like old school text messages. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have any good platform to use it.
Yeah, I mean, with our platform, you could get it on a text, pull it into the platform, coach it, and send it in a second, right? Or you could get it shared on the platform. No, there's platforms that allow for the coaching, but not the ease of video sharing, uploading, and storing. So other platforms that have been around for 14, 15 years are actually even more expensive. They might have a little bit more high-end technology in the coaching side, but really when you're just showing a couple, 3 things, all you need to be able to do is draw and talk and share. So that's really our bread and butter that no one does as good as us, is the streamlined coach video sharing, where, like I said, if you have your son shooting a puck in the driveway, you want to send it to me through text or through Clever, you can. I could pull it up and send it back to you in a minute, a coached video. And like I said, on the team side, which I have never seen anyone, it's the digital whiteboards. So we have hockey, baseball, basketball, and soccer. So I send out my drill lessons to my coaches. I send out breakouts to my parents and players. I send out D zone through our digital whiteboards. So you could pull up a whiteboard for hockey. You can draw your drills on it, whatever you want to do for the practice. And then you send it as a video file to your coach rather than, a piece of paper and then take a snapshot and there's X's and O's all over. This video, the whiteboard, is actually interacting with the other side, showing them exactly what they're doing for practice, if that makes sense.
You've built this thing from the ground up. What's been the biggest unforeseen challenge that you've had to deal with? You know what I mean? It's something you're just like, fuck, this is hard.
Yeah, raising capital is hard, especially in today's climate. We've raised a little bit, but raising capital is always hard. It's a new thing that you have to learn. The other piece, which I never really understood about business, is getting people to use the platform or download it. You think it would be easy just to get, hey, go download the platform. It's hard to get people to sit, download, put their information in, and then try to learn something new. That for me has been by far the hardest challenge that it's to solve. And you can see why companies put so much time and effort into marketing and marketing teams and demo teams and all that. You have to have the capital in order to do it, which is hard to get. And for us, that is the biggest piece, because once we get athletes, parents, and coaches from all these sports using our platform, like we have Olympic silver medalists, USA figure skaters using our platform. They started using it on a demo I did with them 4 days ago. Now they use it for all their program, right? Like, hey, let's send me the video of this turn you did on the ice or whatever. They send it, they coach it, they send it, right? They have an athlete in Korea South Korea they're coaching, and they're coaching them from Colorado in real time, if that makes sense. So once we get the athletes and everyone on the platform, or the coaches and parents, especially because the parents are a massive user group of our app, once we get them on the platform, they like to use it and stay. So we actually have a very good retention rate in comparison to other apps. But it's about getting them on the platform and then getting them up to speed on how it works. So ease of use is big for platforms, making it not too complicated. Sometimes I think our platform may be a little too complicated, and really understanding what your bread and butter is, and what you do better than anyone else. So, and then, like you said, the final piece is how to monetize it, right? And it's, I never went to school. I mean, I was a bio major. I had grade 12 bio, but you don't go through these situations very often in life when you're playing hockey, and I didn't go to college or anything like that. So to be in a situation, sorry, I'm just plugging my computer in, to be in that situation now where you're learning kind of on the fly. And I couldn't help but do it without my brother, though. He was the one with the MBA, and he's a very, smart guy and understands business. He's been with banks and all that. So, he's the one that really understood what to do and how to do it. But in order to do it, it's a pretty hard thing
Could
to
you
do.
partner with different leagues or teams? Like, have you guys looked into a ton of partnerships? Do you guys have any partnerships currently?
So we have partnerships, obviously, with the Clever Super League. That's the league that we have here in Ontario. We have it with some youth hockey teams. Now, like you said, it's how do you get it to the league side? It is a very hard thing to do, is to get a meeting with someone with a league that will become accustomed to it, then that will push it top down to everyone else. Um, we've talked to many different leagues of different sports. It's now about the execution of how do we get these leagues to understand how to use it in order to push it, to make all their athletes and parents use it, just to understand like this can actually help your coaches save time, coaches coach coaches, coaches coach parents, coaches coach athletes. So it is hard to partner with leagues. It's very hard. There's so many different layers, to getting it to the person you need to in order to make it happen.
What would be the biggest home run for this app in the next 5 years?
I would love to partner or get it with with an organization like USA Hockey or women's hockey or baseball, or some sort of American sided uh, youth sports program that could really help push this to get thousands and thousands of athletes, parents, and coaches on. Now, is Clever going to be something that I want to take public or something? I've never really thought that far about it. I think it's just about growing the platform and giving athletes, parents, and coaches right now these type of tools, and kind of keep building the platform and see where it kind of takes us. Whether it's if it's an acquisition one day, if it's a partnership, whatever it may be, that'll come down the line. We've put thought into everything, but right now it's just about building the platform and trying to get people to use it and understand how useful it is for them.
Well, get it in the hands of Hockey Canada after their last 2 weeks.
We've tried. I've talked to different. I've emailed the head of every single provincial, over probably 3 years ago now. I've emailed the head of every single provincial outlet. You don't get answers back, right? It's really, really hard to get answers. And then, I've even looked at, there was a javelin throwing program. They were using it, a bowling program, right? But how do you get it into like the hands of the people that really could use it first off, and push it to the people that may want to use it in order to get better? It's a hard thing to do when you don't get answers or calls back.
Yeah, it's tough if you're not even getting no's. You're just getting iced on repeat on email after email.
Yeah, I went through BC, Alberta, Manitoba, went through all the emails of the people who to email and this type of thing, and never heard anything back. So it's pretty hard to do. The difference though between Canada and the US, why I say the US is more of intrigue, is just because I feel like they're always the American consumer is very, very wanting to adapt and learn and get better constantly. Um, because I just feel there's more pressure there to do it. Where Canada, the consumer is a little bit different. I feel like we have way more Americans using this app than Canadians, right? So I feel like the American consumer is definitely one that really likes to look at new technology or new things in order to enhance performance and get better.
That's awesome. I never thought you'd turn into a crazy hockey dad, but here we are.
No, I'm crazy. Yeah.
Couple last minute hockey questions before we go. Now that you're a media guy, are you excited about the upcoming Four Nations?
Yeah, I am. I think it'll be good to finally get it going. I do wish Russia was there, just like the World Juniors. I do wish those top players are there. I understand there's other things going on, but I don't see why they can't be playing to get the top players. They're already playing in the NHL, and it's an NHL hosted event. So it would be nice to see a couple more teams, I would say. I do find it a little bit unfair to the Czech Republics and these countries that aren't going to be able to get their teams together prior to the Olympics, where these four nations are able to kind of see what they need to get, tinker with, move around before the Olympics. So I think I understand it's a tight time frame. Only a few games can happen. The way the tournament's set up, it's basically you lose and you're pretty much out, right? Almost. I think it's like you got to win two or double elimination almost. Is that pretty much how it's set up?
I think so.
Yeah. So I understand it's a short time frame. So I'm excited to see it. I just like seeing all the best players in the world together. I just wish there was more of the best players able to be there.
Who's going to win the cup this year?
I have Vegas. Yeah, Vegas. I feel like at the start of the year I was feeling Edmonton, but I still think I'm thinking Vegas now. I just like how they're built. I think they're going to always add a couple pieces that they need, not necessarily anything crazy, but think of Barbashev when they added him. I didn't know he was ever going to be a 30-goal guy, right? So I just like how Vegas is built from the back end out. I mean, Edmonton's the sexy pick, but I'd take Vegas. Why? Who do you got?
Are you? Ooh.
I always think Colorado in a weird way could kind of figure it out.
Yeah.
Pieces can come together.
If they add one or two more pieces, yeah.
Like
I mean, the dream for them is Landeskog coming back, but I mean, people have been talking about that for 3 years. We'll see.
I'm not really in love with anyone from the East. So I think Florida, it's going to be hard pressed to do it again, just going back-to-back years. I mean, Carolina, really? I don't think so.
I don't think Carolina. Your longtime centerman had that article, I think, that came out in I think it was GQ recently. You think we see him in the NHL again?
Taser?
Yeah.
I hope so. It would be interesting to see him play again. I know I text with him still here. We talk about, how he's doing and I always send him my full support, whatever he needs to get it done. I hope he can do it because, he's always taken care of himself very well. Obviously, he was on some retreat trying to get healthy as well and trying to figure out whatever he had. But just to see what it would look like to see him play again after all he's been through and get him back. I mean, I'd be at the first game if
it'd be so good for hockey too if he ends up signing with a big market team. Like if somehow he ended up in like Toronto and they went on a good cup run or something like that, I think would be great for the game.
Someone said Toronto is implying about him, right? They've implied about him.
Well, I'm sure a lot of those top teams. I mean, who knows? But I mean, even if he's at 60% of the player he used to be, he'd help pretty much every team in the NHL.
Yeah, just throw him on the third line. No, yeah, I'll tell him that too. You're just going on the third line, Taser. Deal with it.
Awesome. Well, dude, it's good to catch up. Congrats on all the success you're having with Clever and everything, and appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Say hi to your brother.
I will. My brother's in Sweden right now. Right, I'm here. I'm ending the recording. Thanks for doing that, dude.
Yeah.